struggling with the costs of health care, college, prescription drugs, and retirement security. To get serious about breaking our dangerous dependence on foreign oil and enacting the recommendations of the 9/11 Commission recommendations. And all Americans have recognized to finally acknowledge that what we're doing in Iraq isn't working and we desperately need to change course. We can do these things, and we can do more if we put the long-term interests of our country ahead of a constant effort to seek political advantage. It's time for the endless campaign to stop and the hard work of governing to begin. And this is our pledge to you. You have given us a chance to turn this country around, and we'll give you the government that no longer lets you down. We will do it by reaching across the partisan divide, setting aside the bitterness of the last few years, and leading America in a new direction. That's our commitment. And tonight we extend a hand of a cooperation to the President, our colleagues across the aisle. We will work with you when we agree. We will challenge you when we don't. But our goal will always be the best interests of our country. We welcome the opportunity to usher in a new era of responsibility in Washington. And there's a lesson. I want you to hear this lesson. The American people never lose their zeal for reform, and neither can we. The old era of irresponsibility is over, and the new era of real reform has just begun. And I want to just thank a few people, if I can. I want to thank one person in particular. She has been tireless campaigner, a heroic fundraiser, and she will soon make history as the first female Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi.
All right, we're watching what's going on. We're going to continue our special coverage. Larry King is standing by as well. Let's just recap where we stand. It's midnight now here on the East Coast. The House of Representatives, CNN projects, will become Democratic-controlled. That's why you hear Rahm Emanuel, who was in charge of trying to get Democrats elected to the House of Representatives, as enthusiastic as he is right now. The House of Representatives, CNN projects, will be led by the Democrats. Nancy Pelosi will become the Speaker of the House of Representatives. The situation in the United States Senate right now remains unclear. The Democrats have picked up 3 Republican-held seats. We've projected they've held all of their own seats, including in New Jersey and in Maryland. There are still 4 outstanding races right now. The Democrats need to win 3 of them in order to get to that magic number of 6 and become the majority in the U.S. Senate. It's incredibly close in those states, especially in the state of Virginia, where Jim Webb right now is slightly ahead of George Allen, the incumbent Republican, with about 99% of the vote tallied. But it's still very much up in the air. We're going to stay on top of this story. We're not leaving until we know who will control the United States Senate. That could take some time. Lou Dobbs is standing by with more. Lou?
Well, thank you very much. That 2,300,000 votes in Virginia, separated by just about 2,400 votes. Jeffrey Toobin, our senior legal analyst, is here. And obviously, Jeffrey is here because this says recount and brings up the prospect of litigation.
It certainly does. Just a little primer on Virginia law. If one candidate is behind by less than 1%, at the end of the official tally of votes, that candidate has a right automatically to request and receive a recount. Here we're talking about 2.3 million votes approximately.
Amazing.
That means if the margin is under, say, 23,000 votes, there'll be a right to a recount. Here, the margin is now 3,000 votes. So it seems clear that whichever candidate is behind after tonight will certainly have the right to ask for a recount.
Now, Virginia's gone through a recount just last year.
Remarkably, just last year in the race for state attorney general, a similar number of votes cast, just under 2 million votes cast. The margin on election night, the Republican was leading by 327 votes. The recount, which by the way took until December 22nd, so I mean this was not a quick thing. December 22nd, the Republican wound up picking up just 27 votes. There was not much play. So the message is, you want to win this vote, George Allen, Mr. Webb, win it tonight.
That's very impressive that they would hold that strongly. Now, the issue we have to kind of be concerned about is the types of voting machines that were used and the reliability of those and the capability to carry out that recount.
I mean, we have received periodic reports of problems in Virginia with individual machines, nothing large scale, but it doesn't take a large scale change to switch 3,000 votes. I mean, this is a very small margin. But this recent history suggests that it would be very tough to make up 3,000 votes in a recount.
This margin, which is holding just about 2,400 votes out of it's inconceivable, 2.3 million votes. We have deployed around the country this evening 850 lawyers from the Justice Department, about 2,000 lawyers from each political party. What do you think the odds are that we're going to see any significant litigation as a result of what has transpired on this election day?
I think you can't know yet. The way these generally work is first the recount takes place, and in the course of the recount, that's where the facts are developed, where one side or another begins litigation. But certainly if the side that's behind, if the margin remains this close, and it seems impossible that the margin won't be, the margin will have to be this close, they're going to have to look very seriously at a recount, whichever side loses, because, I mean, the whole Senate could hang on the result.
And we're not seemingly making much of an advance in vote counts in Missouri right now. Montana, obviously, it's still early there, so we've got a lot of waiting to do through this evening.
There could be more recounts and more litigation to discuss as the evening goes on.
Absolutely. Jeffrey Toobin, thank you very much. America Votes 2006. Okay. Just a second here. We're getting a little counsel to your local anchor. Right. We're going to, I'm just talking with David Borman, our executive producer here, was giving me some fresh instructions, and amongst them, to bring in our own Larry King, who's going to be talking with DNC Chairman Howard Dean. Larry?
Thank you very much, Lou. This is a special 1 hour and 54-minute edition of Larry King Live. We'll be with you till 2 a.m. Eastern Time, checking back in with panels and groups all around the country, checking in with winners and maybe some losers as well on this historic off-year election night. Let's first, though, go to Washington, D.C. and check in with Howard Dean, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. How do you feel?
Pretty good. We got a ways to go in the Senate, but it looks like we do have the House, that Nancy Pelosi will be Speaker, and that we will give America the new direction they asked for. I'm delighted.
Is the House as big a victory as you expected?
It's actually a little bigger than I expected, according to the CNN projections. But, you know, those aren't real votes yet, and there's still votes to be counted in California and votes to be cast still in Hawaii. But it's a very big win. It looks like we're going to pick up about 30 seats. That's very, very good, very strong. And as I said, it will allow us to do the things the American people want us to do, which we think is make things easier for ordinary working and middle-class people, and also to try to give us a new direction in Iraq.
What surprised you tonight?
I think some of the depth of the victory. I tell you one of the things that delighted me. First of all, I think Chuck Schumer and Rahm Emanuel deserve an enormous amount of credit. But I am particularly, of course, delighted that we're picking up seats in supposedly red areas. One of the things I very much wanted to do with the Democratic Party was to reach out to people in states that we didn't think we could win. Nebraska, we're ahead in western Nebraska. Whether we're going to win or not, I don't know. But we have a shot in southern Idaho. We've already picked up seats in upstate New York. We think we're going to pick one up in Kansas. These are great things for the future of the Democratic Party because we need to be a national party. We need to be competitive in every state. We're going to win governor's races. We've already won, I think, 3 or 4. We'll probably come up with 2 or 3 more. And some of these governorships are in great states. Arkansas, we've won already. So I'm just delighted because we're finally beginning to become a national party again after 12 years.
Now you got 4 Senate seats here up for grabs: Virginia, Maryland, Tennessee, Montana. You got to win 3 of them. What are your chances?
Well, you know, the math is tough for us. Virginia now looks very good. We believe that the remaining votes to come in Virginia are from Northern Virginia, including absentee ballots. So we think that Jim Webb's margin will get a little bigger, perhaps. And then we've got 3 tough states that are very, very close, and we got to win 2 of them: Tennessee, Montana, and Missouri. And we got to win 2 out of those 3. That's a tough order, but I think we can do it.
Thanks, Howard. Lieutenant, the former governor of Vermont, Howard Dean, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, a happy man tonight. The president, by the way, will hold a press conference tomorrow in response to all of this, and you'll see it on CNN. Let's check back in New York with Wolf Blitzer. Wolf.
Larry, thanks very much. And we're watching these races very, very closely. Those 4 Senate races that hold the balance of power in the United States Senate. Still unclear what happens in those states, but we're staying on top of it every step of the way. The Democrats, in order to become the majority in the U.S. Senate, need to win 3 of the 4. Not an easy challenge by any means. As of right now, they've captured 3 Republican-held seats in the U.S. Senate. They've held their own, according to our own projections, including in New Jersey and in the state of Maryland. If they get 3 of those 4 remaining undecided Senate races, they will be in the majority, and it could take a while. We'll stay on top of it every step of the way. Let's go take a look. Let's go take a look and see where it stands right now. And we'll start in Tennessee, where Bob Corker is facing a very, very stiff competition from Harold Ford Jr., the congressman, with 88%. 88% of the vote. They are Corker slightly ahead of Ford. By the way, the video that we're showing, these are pictures coming in. You see Harry Reid, the Senate Democratic leader, Nancy Pelosi, the House Democratic leader. They're surrounded by Chuck Schumer and Rahm Emanuel, who were both responsible for trying to get Democrats elected to the Senate and House, respectively. Harry Reid, the minority leader in the Senate, is about to make some remarks before some enthusiastic and excited Democrats. Unclear, of course, whether the Democrats will be the majority in the Senate. It is clear the Democrats will be the majority in the House. We'll listen in briefly.
America tonight, all across America tonight, from the deserts around Searchlight, Nevada, to the tenements in Brooklyn, New York, and everything in between. There is in the air a wind of change, a wind of change. America, all over America tonight, have said, we want to change. All over America tonight, they've come to the conclusion, as we did some time ago, that a one-party town just simply doesn't work. America has come to the conclusion, as we did months ago, that we must change direction in Iraq. America has seen, as we've seen, that losing 3,000 Americans has been unnecessary, costing the American people $3 billion a week, 22,000 wounded. Our brave fighting men and women we support 100%. But they, as indicated by the Air Force Times, by the Navy Times, by the Army Times yesterday are calling for change, President Bush must listen. We must change course in Iraq.
All right, Harry Reid, the Democratic leader in the U.S. Senate, he's anxiously awaiting word, as all of us are, whether the Democrats or the Republicans become the majority in the United States Senate. There's still uncertainty as of this moment right now. Dana Bash is over there at Democratic headquarters in Washington listening to all of this. They're thrilled, I'm sure, Dana, that the Democrats will be the majority in the House.
Thrilled for sure, and we are waiting to hear from the person who they have said many times already here this evening will be the first female Speaker of the House. They believe that is Nancy Pelosi, and what she will say here, Wolf, will be very important in terms of setting the tone. She was pretty much a person who was, the Republicans ran against her when they were running against Democrats on the campaign trail, especially in some conservative states. She was the boogeyman, so she understands that. She not only feels that she has to reach out across the aisle, but she's going to have to reach out within her own caucus, Democratic caucus, because it is going to be very, very different. There are going to be people who consider themselves liberal, like Nancy Pelosi, and people who consider themselves very conservative. So she understands the tone she sets tonight will really dictate the kind of leadership and the kind of dynamic inside the House of Representatives there will be over the next 2 years.
Dana, thank you. Dana Bash over with the Democrats in Washington. Let's check where we stand right now in the United States Senate. These are the four seats that are the four races that are still unclear in Tennessee, with 90% of the precincts reporting. Bob Corker has a slight advantage over Harold Ford Jr., 51-48%. In Missouri, with 62% of the precincts reporting, Jim Talent has a slight advantage right now, 50-46% over Clara McCaskill. We don't know where the outstanding votes are coming from. In Virginia, with 99% of the votes precincts reporting now, a slight, very slight advantage of about 2,500 or so votes out of 2.1 million cast for Jim Webb, the Democratic challenger to the incumbent George Allen. And in Montana, 21% of the precincts reporting John Tester, the challenger, has an advantage over Conrad Burns, the Republican senator. Let me walk over to Jeff Greenfield, and you're going to explain right now this balance of power. I see the numbers 48 and 48 right now.
This gets more and more interesting. Let's assume for a moment, let's assume that Jim Webb holds that 2,200 vote lead, and that's a pickup. That would be a pickup for the Democrats. Let's assume, just bear with me for a minute, that in Montana, John Tester, who has a lead with not that many votes in, picks that up, and let's assume that in Tennessee, Bob Corker retains his lead over Harold Ford Jr. and will give that state to the Republicans. So what do we have? We have 50-49. Missouri, which has reporting a lead for Jim Talent. The word we are getting is that more of the vote is left to be counted in McCaskill territory, Democratic territory, than in Talent territory. St. Louis County, though that's not part of the city, but it tends to vote a little more Democratic than Republican, has yet to be heard from in great detail. And that, you know, if that vote were to go Democratic, what would you have?
51-49. If it went Republican, you'd have 50-50, and that would raise all sorts of other questions, which we'll explore momentarily. But let's listen to Nancy Pelosi right now. I guess we could call her the incoming Speaker of the House of Representatives, the first woman ever to hold that responsibility.
Tonight is a great victory for the American people. Today, the American people voted for change, and they voted for Democrats to take our country in a new direction. And that is exactly what we intend to do. The American people voted for a new direction to restore civility and bipartisanship in Washington, D.C. And Democrats promised to work together in a bipartisan way for all Americans. The American people voted to restore integrity and honesty in Washington, D.C. And the Democrats intend to lead the most honest, most open, and most ethical Congress in history. The American people voted for a new direction for a fairer economy. And Democrats intend to work for an economy where all Americans participate in the prosperity of our great country. And nowhere did the American people make it more clear that we need a new direction than in the war in Iraq. Stay the course has not made our country safer, has not honored our commitment to our troops, and has not made the region more stable. We cannot continue down this catastrophic path. And so we say to the President, Mr. President, we need a new direction in Iraq. Let us work together to find a solution to the war in Iraq. The campaign is over. Democrats are ready to lead.
Nancy Pelosi, who will be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives, the first woman to become Speaker of the House of Representatives, very, very excited, speaking about the future. The Democrats will be the majority in the House, but it's still unclear at this moment who will be the majority in the United States Senate. There are still 4 Senate seats very much in play. We're staying on top of this story. We'll update you with all the latest numbers coming in right after this short break. Still lots of uncertainty as far as those 4 undecided Senate seats are concerned. We'll update you momentarily on that, but I want to bring in Larry King. He's got a special guest. Larry?
Thank you very much, Wolf. He's not on the ballot tonight, but he may be the hottest political figure in America. Arguably, he is. Senator Barack Obama, Democrat of Illinois. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great, Larry. It's a good night so far, and we still got a little ways to go on the Senate side, but I think there's no doubt that the American people have said we want some change. We want some practical, common sense solutions to issues like health care and energy and education, and most of all with respect to the war in Iraq. And we're seeing that in the House races, and you know the Senate races are still tight, but we've already gotten some pickups. So overall, I think a good night for Democrats and a strong message from the American people.
Biggest disappointment, the possibility of Ford's defeat in Tennessee?
Well, on the Senate side, that would be a disappointment because Harold Ford is as good a candidate as I've seen, and I've traveled a lot this year on behalf of candidates. He's extraordinarily talented, and I think that if he does not win tonight, and it's still too close to call, and we're still hopeful that some late-breaking returns pull him up. But if he doesn't, I guarantee you he will be back because he is an extraordinary talent and a really fine young man.
What does this mean, Senator? The Democrats control the House, and let's say the Senate's very close or even or whatever. What change occurs in America?
Well, I think that a lot is going to rest on how the president approaches the results of the election tonight. He's going to be there for 2 more years. And the question is, does he want a legacy of accomplishment, or does he want gridlock and more of the same in Iraq? If he chooses the former, then I think there's an opportunity for Democrats to join with Republicans and the administration to say, let's figure out how to control health care costs and make sure that it's more accessible to more people. Let's come up with a bold energy plan that could really put us on the pathway to energy independence. Let's sit down with the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Jim Baker and Lee Hamilton's commission to figure out how do we stabilize Iraq, make the Iraqi government take more responsibility for coming up with a political accommodation so we can start phasing down our troops. There's opportunities to do good work, but the president's going to have to, I think, change from the highly ideological partisan approach that he's taken during the first 6 years of his term when basically Republicans controlled the entire ball game here in Washington.
A couple of other things. How does the election tonight affect your decision, which you tell us will come in January, about seeking the presidency?
Well, it confirms in my mind that the American people are eager to move in a new direction, and it confirms that they want a politics that is unifying as opposed to divisive, and that they're tired of slash and burn politics. But it's important for me to take some time to think about how I can be most useful in the future. This will probably be the first week in at least a month where I'm not having to take off my shoes in airport security lines, and I'll have a chance to talk to my wife, and I'll have a chance to reflect on what I've already accomplished and what I would like to see happen both in the Democratic Party and in the country. And so it's going to be, I think, sometime before I actually come up with a final conclusion.
But nothing that happened tonight would discourage you.
Nothing would happen that happened tonight would discourage me from making that race, but it's something that I've got to spend some serious time thinking about.
Thanks very much, Senator Obama. Senator Barack
Always
Obama.
Great to talk to you, Larry.
Let's meet one of your confreres. He is a victor tonight, Senator Robert Menendez, Democrat of New Jersey. He joins us in East Brunswick. Congratulations, Senator Menendez. Were you surprised at all at the size of the victory?
I've been saying for a while that the polls were all having us moving in the right direction, and I'm glad to see that the people of New Jersey today voted for the politics of change and hope and opportunity and rejected the politics of smear and fear, and that was a great success tonight.
What part did Iraq play in your election?
A very big part, I think, Larry. I didn't vote for the war 4 years ago. I didn't believe it was in the national security interest of the United States, and therefore took a principled position against it 4 years ago, and have been an advocate of transitioning out of Iraq. And I think that New Jerseyans came to understand that 2,800 American lives later, $380 billion later, $8 billion each and every month, that we continue in Iraq without changing the course, that it was time to send the president a clear message that the American people want to move in a different direction. And I think certainly New Jersey did that tonight. It was a big part of what I stood for, what I believe in, what I communicated with the voters of New Jersey.
And have you spoken to your opponent?
I did very briefly before I came out to give our speech, and I wished him well, and him and his family well, and look forward to being able to serve now in the United States Senate for the next 6 years.
Thank you, Senator, and congratulations. Let's go back to Election Central and Wolf Blitzer. Wolf.
Larry, thanks very much. We want to just update our viewers on what's going on in Virginia right now. We're going to put these numbers up on our wall over here. The Virginia race incredibly close right now between the incumbent Republican Senator George Allen, the challenger Democrat Jim Webb. Take a look at this. With 99% of the precincts reporting, 50% for Webb, 49% for George Allen. A difference, if you add up the numbers, more than 2.2 million million cast of only about, what, 2,500 or so votes right now. Almost all of the precincts have now reported. This is emerging about as close as it gets. And just want to also remind our viewers that if the eventual result is less than 1%, the defeated candidate can't call for an automatic recall, an automatic recount, that is, and the state would have to go forward with that. George Allen and Jim Webb in a very close race. Jeff Greenfield, you're looking at this as closely as anyone.
Well, as if this wasn't close enough, there are reports that the Associated Press numbers are different, are inverted from the Secretary of State's numbers. So we are getting two different numbers, one showing Webb with a 2,100 vote lead and the other showing George Allen with a 2,100 vote lead. So we can't say for sure that this incredibly thin margin actually represents what the vote count is. Now just remember what I showed you a minute ago. If Claire McCaskill wins in Missouri, Corker wins in Tennessee, and Tester wins in Montana, this race will determine control of the U.S. Senate. And thinking about 2000, there is a Green Party candidate on the ballot who has won about 25,000 votes, all of them probably, or most of them, coming from James Webb. And we have the possibility of recounts and lawsuits to determine this time not who the president is, but which party controls the Senate. Welcome back.
It's a little confusing right now in Virginia. We're going to try to sort this out as best as we can. Anderson, I think it's fair to say that it's a dramatic development.
To say the least, yeah, 3,000 either way. James Carville and Paul Begala have been working the phones, talking to various people. You've been looking at the numbers. It is confusing, to say the least. I mean, 3,000 in either way, depending on who you're listening to. Why are the numbers like this?
Right. Well, who's in and who's out, right? What votes have been counted and what remain out? We've got a program here at CNN that has allowed me to take a look at what counties have reported and what haven't. If you look here, Arlington County, which Webb carried overwhelmingly, still has 2% of its precincts out, which is just one box, but that's, you know, that's something. Isle of Wight County, which is a county that Webb is getting 56% in generally, that's still got 8% of its boxes out. Fairfax County, which is a huge Democratic stronghold, and particularly for a Democrat like Webb, has one of its boxes out. The Allen people, though, are obviously not giving up. Prince Edward County is a county where Allen got 52%. And that's still got 9% of its boxes out, and 1% in Virginia Beach, which is a Republican stronghold. So this thing is all over the map. Loudoun County, though, classic suburban swing county, 7% of its boxes are out, and that is split almost perfectly 50-50 in the performance of the 93% of the boxes that are already in.
It is incredible that I mean, 2+ million voters, and it's down to some 3,000.
And they go to, as I understand it, and I'm talking to, it goes to J.B. Porsche, who's the head of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, because it goes to provisional ballots tomorrow. These are like people that come in and get challenged and they say, put your ballot over here. So we're going to have a provisional ballot count probably tomorrow. There's obviously going to be a recount of which everybody would take. I mean, you're entitled to it and your supporters. I wouldn't blame Allen or Webb if they took that. And it looks like Montana, I'm told, looks very good for the Democrats, and if Missouri turns out to be Democratic, the fate of the United States Senate is going to hang in a Virginia recount.
And what are you hearing from Tennessee? You hearing
nothing?
Doesn't look good
for the Democrats. Ford ran a hell of a race. Probably my favorite candidate the entire year. Did very well. Got 48%. He's got an enormous future in the Democratic Party. He enormous future, and I think he just conducted himself very, very well. But right now, you know, we could lose in Missouri, but I think our people don't think that we are, and I think it's going to come down to Virginia.
You talk about a nail biter. I mean, this is about as quick as it gets.
This is about as tight as it gets, and I too want to add to James's comments on Harold Ford. Regardless of what party you're in, Harold did a great job, and I think made everybody that's ever run for public office, made us pretty proud. You know, I look at the Virginia situation, Anderson, and it's about, as Paul said, it's about 9 or 10 counties out. I've got 9. I think Paul had 10. Looks like they're pretty divided on Republican, Democrat counties, where they lean. So that's going to be very interesting when the tally is counted. I've talked to the talent people, and they're saying that you know, the vote in the rural communities came in. They felt pretty good about that. They think they're standing their own.
This is Jim Talon in Missouri running against Claire McCaskill.
That's right. I think they're standing their own in Kansas City and St. Louis. So they hadn't been willing to call it, but it just again says that we're in for another couple hours.
The Democrats on the ground in Missouri say that 2/3 of the African-American precincts in Kansas City have not yet reported. They take that as very good news for Claire McCaskill, the Democrat. They also say that St. Louis County has only reported 30 or 40%. Those are the urban strongholds that a Democrat has to win big in. JC's right, the rural precincts, rural counties, largely have already reported. So the Democrats I've talked to there, Richard Martin, who's the campaign manager there for Claire McCaskill, cautiously optimistic. He's not ready to call it for his candidate yet either, but they're pretty optimistic.
Yeah, I want to be clear what our view is we're talking to these guys and they're very graciously giving us the information they have. They're not saying we're going to win, but I have the sense in talking to the McCaskill people that they like their position, that they'd rather be them than be Talent right now. That's the sense of maybe the Talent people feel the same way. It's probably that close. We're going to be working hard. We're going to be working the phones and to try to get us as inside as we possibly can.
But in terms of Virginia, no matter what happens in the next couple hours, tomorrow this is still going to be going on.
To provisional ballots tomorrow is my understanding, and then there'll be a recount. We're going to see lawyers all over this, you know, I'm sure all over Virginia. There's going to be a recount. There's going to be provisional ballots. It's awfully close. The same thing could very well happen in Missouri. The United States Senate hangs in balance here.
Oh, Alan is beginning to speak. We just got to go to that and then talk to JC in a moment. Let's listen in.
In every single election night, I always first give thanks to God. I thank God for many things, but the greatest blessing in my life is my wonderful wife, Susan, who is just absolutely wonderful. And the reason so many of you all like me. I also thank God for my family, from Little Brook to Tyler and Forrest, who's growing. My brother Bruce is here. My in-law Susan's parents, thank you for Susan. Great job. Christine and my brother Greg and Trevor and the Jasons, all the Jasons family. I don't know how many others we all have up here. Stephen and Deborah. And it's also good to see our Attorney General here, Lieutenant Governor here, and their brides. Benny Lambert, thank you. Thank you for being here with me. Shows a lot of character, Benny, and I appreciate it. I thank God that we live in a country where the rights of people are enshrined and protected in our Constitution. We are a representative democracy. This has been an interesting election, and the election continues. As Senator Warner said, good morning, Patriots. And all of us have worked very hard, and all of you all who are still here tonight have worked so hard with a tremendous amount of dedication, efforts, devotion, and prayers to this campaign. I also thank the great efforts of my campaign staff who are around here somewhere. I see some of you all here. And all the other volunteers who've come in and worked in this campaign. You've heard me say, as John Warner and I and others were barnstorming around the Commonwealth, the world is controlled by those who show up. And we were talking about how important it was to get every vote in. Oh, wherever our Attorney General is, if he's up, where is he? He's in the back. He went through one of these last year. So the point of the matter is, John's gone through a similar situation. In fact, the first time I ever won an election, I won by, on election night, it was 18 votes. We had to have a recount. So the point of the matter is, we're still counting votes. It seems like every time there's a new email, you know, there's some more votes coming in. There's absentee precincts. There are some counties that say that, well, they'll get to counting the ballots later on today. In other words, they've gone home and they'll come back to work tomorrow and count those precincts. So the point of the matter is, I've been through it. I think that the counting, I know the counting will continue through the night. It'll continue tomorrow. And I want to thank you all because I know you're going to be like a bunch of eagles and hawks watching how every one of these votes are accurately counted. And I thank you for your participation, and proud, and I appreciate from the bottom of my heart, and I know I'm speaking for Susan as well and everyone on our campaign team. Thank you all. Thank you for your dedication, for your encouragement, and also your prayers. My friends, stay strong for freedom and representative democracy. Accuracy in elections will prevail. Thank you and have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow counting the votes.
Senator George Allen making it clear to his supporters that while he didn't use the word that patience would be necessary, making it clear that he's anticipating a protracted process. And as you look at the vote board, Senator Allen ahead of James Webb, James Webb ahead of Senator Allen right now by just about 2,300 votes, and it just doesn't get much closer than that. Setting the stage, talking about how he won in a recount his first election, an election he won by 18 votes. And it looks like while he is very sanguine about the prospect of a long process and recount, I don't think he's gone through one where the absolute power, the balance of power in the United States Senate hangs in the balance. Wolf, over to you.
All right, Lou, the number had been 4, the number of undecided Senate seats. It is now down to 3. Right now, CNN is projecting that Bob Corker will be the next United States Senator from the state of Tennessee. Bob Corker, we project, will beat Harold Ford Jr. in this fiercely fought, very competitive contest. Bob Corker will succeed Bill Frist as the next United States Senator from Tennessee when all the votes are counted. That is our projection. That means there are now three undecided seats remaining, and this balance of power, Jeff Greenfield, in the United States Senate still remains up in the air. But this was a must-win for the Republicans in Tennessee, and according to our projection, they've captured it.
Right, Harold Ford Jr. bidding to be the first African-American from a Confederate state since Reconstruction. There's some debate about whether Maryland is the South, but just failing short. We have 3 seats left. We have Missouri, where you just heard James Carville and Paul Begala talk about the relative optimism on the part of the Democrats. We have Virginia. We'll be talking about that for several days. That race is, 2,100 votes. And out in Montana, where as of now, with not enough of the votes in certainly to project, we do have Conrad Burns, the incumbent Republican senator, considered one of the more vulnerable senators all season long, trailing John Tester, the state Senate president. So, could we have a 50-50 Senate? Could we have the Senate decided by, I don't know, a month or so of recounts and lawsuits? You bet we can. It depends on what happens in these 3 states. Once again, Virginia, Missouri, Montana.
And those are the 3 states that will determine the majority. And I want to go to Missouri right now. If we take a look at this, with 74% of the vote in the precincts reporting now in Missouri, Claire McCaskill's at 48%, Jim Tallent's at 48%. She is ahead by a little more than 1,000 votes right now in the state of Missouri. That is an incredibly close contest. 74% of the precincts reporting in Missouri. Claire McCaskill and Jim Talent very much neck and neck right now. It doesn't get a lot more closer. It doesn't get a lot more tight than that, Lou. As we look at this, 3 Senate seats still undetermined. If the Democrats pick those seats up, they'll be the majority, but it's going to be a tough struggle to get all 3. And Virginia, we may not know for a while.
Well, I think we all knew that this was going to be an incredible story tonight. This is absolutely incredible. These tight races, the balance of power, the Senate hanging here. Let's go to, however, one race that was decided to Ford headquarters, Harold Ford Jr.'s headquarters, and our Joe Johns. Joe, to you.
What we're hearing now is that Harold Ford is on his way over here to the hall. People have been waiting to see him all night long. I can tell you these were 2 very fine candidates in Tennessee who went head-to-head, and from what I can tell moving around this state, the people of Tennessee really agonized over this race. When you look at Harold Ford, he ran a very good race from start to finish, right down to the wire here, trying to get people first out to the polls, then to be in line when the polls close, then to stay in line long enough to vote. So he did not give this fight up all the way down to the wire. A lot of people saying, well, Mr. Corker may have won this race, and he ran a good race too, but this also turned Harold Ford into a political rock star. Lou, back to you.
Joe, thank you very much. Joe Johns from Harold Ford Jr. headquarters. We're going to go now to Larry King, who has two very special guests with two very different perspectives on this night.
Thank you, Lou. We sure do. In Richmond, Virginia is Ed Gillespie, the former chairman of the Republican National Committee, and in Washington, Terry McAuliffe, the former chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Ed, this story in Virginia tonight, how long you think we can go into a month of recounting here?
Well, you know, I don't know, Larry. First of all, there's not been a decision for any recount at this point. They're still counting ballots. There are outstanding about 20 precincts, some of those absentee that remain out, and you know, about I think a 1,600 vote margin somewhere in there right now. Not very much at all. It could flip again before it's all over. But you know, Virginia, the Commonwealth has a law that says that if you're inside half a percentage point in the margin, then the Commonwealth will pay for a recount, which ordinarily means somebody calls for one.
Are you surprised that Webb has done as well as he has?
I'm not surprised. You know, Virginia demographically is changing. The fact is, we always knew this was going to be a close race. I was confident going in today that Senator Allen was going to win. I still believe he is going to win this race when everything is counted. And but we always knew, as we've talked about off and on over the past month or so, that you know, the Senate was going to come down to probably Missouri and Virginia and Tennessee, and that seems to be where we're ending up.
Of course, when it's this close, no one knows what's going to happen. Terry McAuliffe, you don't know on Virginia. What do you make of the whole evening, Terry?
Well, it's been quite a night. After the votes have now been counted, as you know, Larry, we now control the United States House of Representatives. We now control a majority of the governorships in America. We picked up anywhere from 6 to 8 new Democratic governors in states like Arkansas and Colorado, New York, Ohio. Very important races for us in 2008 in Maryland, Nevada. And now we have the Senate hanging in the balance. I feel very good about our chances where we are. We need to pick up a couple more, obviously. I think Montana is going to be in our category. And you see now that Claire McCaskill has moved up in Missouri, and we still have St. Louis County, St. Louis City, as well as all of the African-American precincts in Kansas City yet to be counted, so I feel great about that. And we're up with Jim Webb in Virginia, so it's been a great night for the Democrats. We've got a lot more votes to count, but I'm very excited, and I want to compliment all the great candidates that we had out there.
And if we had to pick one word to describe what happened to the Republicans, would it be Iraq?
Would it be what?
Iraq.
Oh, Iraq? You know, I think Iraq was obviously a factor in voters' consideration today. I wasn't the only consideration, but look, we're a country at war, and people are frustrated with the direction of the war, and you know, we need to have this debate, and we did, and now we're going to continue it. Obviously, with divided government and the Democrats in control of the House, you know, that's going to continue this debate between the Republicans and the Democrats over what is the best course for us to be victorious in Iraq and to bring our troops home. We all want to bring our troops home, Larry. The question is when and how, and that question will be put to the test, obviously, in the new U.S. House in the next Congress.
Thank you, Ed Gillespie, the former chairman of the Republican National Committee, and Terry McAuliffe, the former chairman of the Democratic National Committee. We're down to 3 biggies right now, and that's Virginia, and that won't be decided maybe for days, and of course Montana, and of course the key state of Missouri. Our election coverage will continue right after these words.
Welcome back. At the beginning of the night, we thought it would be a long night, and it is turning out to be a long night. Could, in fact, be a few days before we know who's in charge, who's in control of the United States Senate. What we do know right now is that the Democrats will be the majority in the House of Representatives. They've captured enough seats to make sure that Nancy Pelosi will be the Speaker of the House. The Democrats will be the chairman of the various committees. Very important moment for the Democrats since losing the House back in 1994. The Senate, though, still up in the air, and it's come down to these three states, Virginia, Missouri, and Montana. For the Democrats, who've already captured 3 of those Republican-held seats to be the majority in the United States Senate, they have to capture all 3 of these, and they will be in the majority. Not an easy task by any means. In Virginia right now, George Allen ever so slightly behind Jim Webb with 99% of the precincts in. You could take a look at that. Only 2,500 or so votes separate these two candidates right now. In Missouri, with 71% of the precincts reporting, Jim Talent, the incumbent Republican senator, slightly ahead of Clara McCaskill, 50 to 47%, but still plenty of precincts out there. In Montana, with 37% of the precincts reporting, the Democratic challenger, John Tester, slightly ahead of Conrad Burns, the longtime incumbent Republican senator. So it's very, very close. These are the 3 states that will make the difference. We're going to stay on top of this story until we find out what's going on. In the meantime, let's bring it back to Lou. Lou?
Well, thank you very much. And we're going to turn to the blogosphere, and they have, the bloggers, a lot to write about tonight. We're going to go to Trist in Washington, D.C., and to our Jackie Schechner, our internet reporter. Jackie.
Lou, they're still hanging in here, and all eyes are on those last 3 Senate seats. But the most heated debate of the night actually took place over the House and between 2 conservatives. I've got Robert Bluey from HumanEvents.com, and on the other side of me is Ed Morrissey from CaptorsQuartersBlog.com. And they were actually arguing about how many House seats we're talking about at the end of the night. What's your prediction, Robert?
I say 30 to 35 seats Republicans lose, and I think the moderates go down. I think this ultimately benefits conservatives because they can elect conservative leadership in the House.
And Ed, what's your prediction?
I say it's going to be between 25 and 27 seats, and I think that this is going to be a big blow for the Republicans this year. I really do.
I'm not saying that the room's getting divided, but Abby Tadden is all the way across the room with liberal reaction. Abby, why don't you give us that perspective of Democratic control of the House?
Well, there was a collective cheer that went up amongst the liberal bloggers in the room when CNN projected that the Democrats would take control of the House. I'm here with liberal blogger John Aravosis of America Blog. John, what effect, if any, did the liberal blogosphere have on these results coming in tonight?
I think the blogs had a significant effect in terms of raising money for the candidates, but also in terms of being an echo chamber. I think on a number of stories like the Mark Foley Page sex scandal, this recent scandal with preacher Haggard, the evangelical who bought drugs and met with a prostitute or something, the blogs had a significant role in terms of actually amplifying those stories, which has an effect on our base, but also on the Republican base. I think it's hard to quantify to say the blogs are responsible for 30% of the election. You can't really do that, but we do know that the blogs had a significant impact, and I think they are players now.
And where are you looking now? We're still having results coming in, liberal bloggers in the room. What races are you looking to at this point in the night?
I think like the rest of the nation, we're all watching Virginia. You know, for personal reasons, I don't love George Allen, but also it's obviously an important race. Also out west, some of the smaller races. You know, Scott Clebb in Nebraska, Angie Piccioni in Colorado. They're just some of the races that I think mattered to the grassroots, that people just felt more of a personal connection with these candidates. Otherwise, we pretty much know where we are. Dems have the House, Republicans have the Senate, and I don't think that's going to change by morning.
And those races, John, some of those that you've been fundraising for as well. So the liberal bloggers in the room still watching some of the races still coming in. Conservative blogs, they're still hanging in here at this late hour. Anderson, we're going to send it back to you right now.
All right, Abby, thanks very much. And we are watching these 3 key Senate races at this point, at this late hour. Is it going to get resolved tonight, John King?
No. In short, no, because the Virginia race is going to go on. You're going to have a recount tomorrow. It looks like this Missouri race, we may get to 100% tonight or
we got
this
71%
morning. We keep
right
calling
now.
it tonight, I guess, by breakfast.
It is morning.
Yeah, yes. But we may get, we're at 71%. Maybe we'll get a little higher than that, but then we're going to have the question of what are the recount rules? What are the campaigns want to say? Will there be 1 or 2 precincts that are out, or will you have questions about irregularity? So are we going to know which party will control the United States Senate by normal breakfast time in the morning? I don't think we will.
Candy, what are you looking for now in this next hour or so?
Closure. But I'm afraid we're not going to get a little coffee, a little closure. I mean, you know, what's interesting is literally all night we've watched these races flip back and forth. It's interesting to me that they are this close, because what it says is, while yes, voters wanted to send a message, it also says that it is more what Republicans have done wrong than what Democrats have done right. They're going to have to prove themselves and show something. They gotta show some leg now. It's all been about, you know, George Bush and what he's done wrong, and the Republicans and what they've done wrong. And these very close races say to me that it's still a very divided country, and still a country that's looking for some progress.
And still unclear, Marcus, what they can do, the Democrats, if they only have the House.
Well, unfortunately, what we know they can do, the only thing we know they can do is subpoena power. All they can do is call in lots of folks and investigate lots of stuff. One thinks about immediately the contracts in Iraq. One thinks about are going to war in the first place. One thinks about increasing the minimum wage. That kind of thing they can do as well, but for that, the Senate could actually block it if the Republicans keep it in their hands. The nightmare scenario, I think George Allen summed it up with the best quote of the night, probably. This has been an interesting election, he said, and the election continues. We hope it does not become like the 2000 election, but if the Democrats' nightmare scenario take Missouri and Montana, it comes down to Virginia, and we're right back to the 2000
And what
election.
did we learn from the exit polling? What jumps out at you, John?
The big thing that jumped out at me is that among voters who said terrorism was a big issue in deciding their vote, they were split, voting Democrat and Republican. George W. Bush against John Kerry won on that question.
A sea change from even 2 years ago.
John Kerry was beat by 20 points on that question alone. That was the deciding factor in the presidential election. The fact that people broke even on it in the congressional election tells you that, to me, is the single biggest legacy of Iraq. The president has lost his credibility, or certainly his edge, when it comes to terrorism. The Republican Party is now equilibrium on that question, and I think you're beginning to hear it in all these speeches tonight. Both parties, I think, realize heading into 2008, yes, we're still going to have troops in Iraq, you're still going to have the war on terrorism, but both want to get back to the basics. The Republicans want to talk about cutting taxes and balancing budgets, smaller government. The Democrats want to talk about domestic issues like health care and raising the minimum wage. The security issues will not disappear, but they have dominated our politics since 9/11. I think we're beginning to see that balance shift a little bit.
I'm watching some activity back here with James Carville and Paul Begala. I just want to check in with them. They have been working the phones, talking to various sources and various campaigns. James, what are you seeing in the numbers?
It's tight. It's tight. I think that the feeling is that Webb will probably go through the night slightly ahead in Virginia. I'm told that there are 31,000 early vote and absentee ballots, mostly in Fairfax County, that have not been counted. They may count them tonight. I can't say for 100% accuracy, but this is what I've been told.
In Fairfax County, why is that
bulk of them, but that would be a Democratic county.
Right.
But if I tell you that somebody was spiking the ball on the Democratic side, that's not the case. And in Missouri, it's just awfully close. And I get conflicting reports. I feel I'd rather beat a Democrat than a Republican in Missouri, but by a little bit, I think, is what I'd say.
What do you think, Paul?
Well, you know the old Warren Zevon song, "Send Lawyers, Guns, and Money"? That's what they're doing. The Webb campaign, as a friend of mine at one of America's elite law schools sent me an email that one of her colleagues had sent her saying, hey, can you get to Virginia? Can you start helping looking at these boxes as they're being counted? I mean, they're putting out an APB for attorneys to go down there and help them out.
And that's happening right now?
That's happening tonight. So I suspect several either law professors or law students are going to start skipping school coming up this week.
What about in Missouri?
In Missouri, the Democrats still, they feel a little more optimistic there. But both campaigns understand, having learned from the Al Gore debacle and the recount, what my party thought was a debacle, is that there's huge advantage to being the one who is leading when the recount begins. There's huge psychological, political, the media, we all start to say, well, McCaskill won, will they take it away from him in a recount? Or Webb won, will they take it away from him? Conversely, if the Republican is leading when they do the first count, it hurts a lot, and that's what they're really pushing for now.
It's never a good sign, JC, when the lawyers get involved.
Well, it's not. The American people should decide, not the lawyers, but...
the people, Americans, I'm a lawyer.
But, you know, James made an interesting point. If there's 31,000 ballots out in Fairfax County, I suspect the Allen folks cannot be very happy about that. That is a strong Democrat area.
60%
I want to
Democrat
say,
county. I can't report that to an absolute certainty, but that's one of the things that I was told from a very good source. I understand that the Allen people are saying some in Loudoun County, they claim they have some votes. I think that we're just going to have to do hard reporting, and facts are going to come into this, and when something is this close, it's going to go on and on and on. But I do feel like that the Webb people think that they will go to bed tonight ahead. And it's huge, but there's no way that any of us can sit here, and we work in the phones as hard as we can, and I understand what's at stake, and I understand that a lot of our listeners on both sides are dying to know, and we right now can't tell you for a fact what's going to happen in Missouri or Virginia. We know it's awfully close. I do know that the Democrats feel good about Montana, but that has to come in too. Understand the math here, Anderson, because it's very important. For the Democrats to take the House back, they have to win the Senate back. Good. They have to win Montana, Missouri, and Virginia. The loss of any one would mean 50-50, and then the vice president would break the tie. So it's very important that our viewers understand that.
Well, let's just make a deal. We'll give you Montana, you give us
like the Missouri Compromise.
We'll go home. It doesn't work like that. Let's go to Lou, who's watching some of these races. Going to talk to a lot of our correspondents who we've deployed. There are lawyers deployed around the country. We've got correspondents deployed around the country as well. Lou?
It sounds pretty exciting, doesn't it, Anderson? More lawyers being deployed all across the country, particularly these 3 states. We are going to turn to our Ed Henry and Chris Lawrence and Jonathan Freed, who happen to just be in all 3 of the contested states. And as of right now, they're also in the campaign headquarters of the 3 candidates who are trailing. That's changing minute to minute. So we're going to turn to you first, Ed Henry, at Senator George Allen's headquarters. Ed?
Well, good morning, Lou Dobbs. That actually was a greeting that George Allen used a short while ago when he finally addressed the troops here who had been waiting all night. He said good morning. They were not expecting that, obviously. They were hoping for a victory much earlier in the evening. That never came. George Allen was up in a suite here at the Marriott in Richmond, Virginia, all night. We're told by people who were going in and out of that suite that it was very tense in there. Let's not forget, this was supposed to be a formality for George Allen. He was supposed to have an easy re-election victory just a few months ago on his way to a White House run in 2008. Instead, right now, the latest count has Democrat Jim Webb up by less than 2,000 votes. There are about 18 precincts all across the Commonwealth of Virginia still left uncounted. That obviously has to be counted in the morning, later this morning, and then, dare I use the R word, recount. Obviously, both sides already throwing that around, but what has to happen first, this is going to take a long time, Lou. The bottom line is we're told that there will be canvassing before there is a recount. There will be canvassing that could go on through the end of November, around November 27th. Then if the total is less than 1% of a difference between the 2 candidates, which it is clearly right now, then the loser can ask for a recount. Then that could go on for some time. So obviously the control of the U.S. Senate could be hanging in the balance, and we may not have an answer for days, maybe weeks, Lou.
Yeah, our Jeffrey Toobin has been going through literally the laws involved, trying to work through the schedule for that very thing. Ed, thank you very much, Ed Henry. Let's turn to Senator Conrad Burns' headquarters in Billings, Montana, where our Chris Lawrence is watching a candidate who, as I said, is trailing at this hour. What's the feeling there, Chris?
Well, Lou, people here came in very excited. Conrad Burns, Senator Conrad Burns, is here. They were a little bit deflated when they saw some of the early numbers, putting Jon Tester ahead by about 8 points. But a representative from Conrad Burns' campaign has been going around the room telling people that some of those early returns are from precincts that tend to traditionally skew Democratic, saying that some of Burns' precincts have yet to come in, and they feel hopeful that at least at some point tonight, those numbers may start to turn around. Lou?
Chris, thank you very much. Let's turn to Jonathan Freed with the McCaskill campaign in St. Louis. And then, just as I was saying that these numbers are changing back and forth, Claire McCaskill has moved ahead with this hardly complete vote, but now up about 1 point on Senator Jim Talent. What's the feeling there now? I saw a little cheering behind you.
There's a tremendous amount of cheering behind me, Lou. We're looking at 80% of the vote in, a lead right now from McCaskill by about 14,000 votes. This has been a tight race for months, and it has been a nail-biter here this evening. People saying that the reports had come in, the votes had come in from those rural, usually solid Republican constituencies. They're still waiting for the vote to come in here in the St. Louis area. These major cities in Missouri usually go Democratic, still waiting for St. Louis. A lot of excitement in this room building, as you can see. People here feeling that they can pull this off, but it's going to be a nail-biter a little while longer because this is close. Lou.
Indeed it is. As we look at those three races, it's clear, I think, not to put too fine a point on it, Jim Carville saying it, James Carville saying it, R. Jeff Greenfield saying it, it's pretty fundamental math. In order to take control of the Senate, Wolf Blitzer, the Democrats have to do a little better than even on this. They've got to win 3.
They got to win all 3 of these still undecided seats. You take a look, there's Jim Webb in Virginia. He's about to speak to his supporters. He's slightly, ever so slightly ahead in Virginia. You can see the tally right there. Let's listen in briefly to Jim Webb.
It's getting pretty late. I want to say that I appreciated what Senator Allen said not long ago when he came on the news and said we all need to respect the process in this country, the democratic process. We all go out, we vote, we argue, we vote. But also would like to say that the votes are in and we won.
Continue to monitor Jim Webb. He's speaking to his supporters. Clearly that race in Virginia remains very, very close. 99% of the precincts reporting right now. Webb slightly ahead of George Allen. We'll continue to watch that. We'll continue to watch the other 2 races that will determine who is the majority in the United States Senate. The Democrats have already captured the majority in the House of Representatives. Much more of our special coverage. Larry King standing by with some excellent guests. That's coming up right after this.
Welcome back to our special election night, now election morning coverage. I'm Larry King in Los Angeles. In a minute, we'll talk with David Gergen of U.S. News and World Report, Amy Holmes, the Republican strategist, and Arianna Huffington, the founder and editor of HuffingtonPost.com, the syndicated columnist. But first, let's go up to San Francisco and check in with Senator Dianne Feinstein. She was reelected tonight. No surprise there. What's your view of the total picture?
Well, my view of the total picture is that it is a signal for from the American people for a change in direction for this nation. And I very much hope that the White House is listening, because you now have a Democratic House and you have a Senate that's going to gain Democratic seats. So it is a consequential evening, especially. Oh, and there's another thing, too. We have the first woman Speaker of the House of Representatives in our lives, and she happens to be from San Francisco, and I think that's pretty special.
Do you expect some material change?
Well, that's hard to tell, Larry, whether there will be a material change. But I think the president has to listen, and that's been a significant deficit of this White House. They don't listen. They seem to know it all. And my hope is that a signal has been sent for a change of direction in Iraq, in foreign policy, in domestic policy. This wouldn't have happened unless there was significant displeasure with what is happening in the White House.
Senator, thank you so much. We'll be seeing you down in L.A. and again in Washington. Senator Dianne Feinstein re-elected again tonight. Now let's check in with Arianna Huffington, David Gergen, and Amy Holmes. Start with Arianna. What's your outlook, how's your overview of what happened?
Well, Larry, this election is about Iraq. Let's get that absolutely straight. Every race you look at, whether it was an upset, whether it was Sherrod Brown in Ohio or Sheldon Whitehouse in Rhode Island, or any number of House races where Republican incumbents were lost, it's Iraq. Again and again, I have a list here. Let me just give you 3 examples. In Arizona, Gabrielle Giffords defeated Randy Graff unequivocally. She said we must leave Iraq. In Kentucky, John Yarmouth beat Ann Northrop unequivocally. He said we are fighting Iraqis now, we are no longer fighting terrorists. In Indiana, in New Hampshire, in Connecticut, wherever you look at, Democrats as well as Republicans need to hear the American people. They spoke very clearly today.
David Gergen, I believe that no Democratic incumbent congressman or congresswoman lost tonight.
Absolutely, Larry. So far, that's true. We've never had that before, I believe. Larry, in my judgment, however these Senate races come out, and they're very exciting, the important point tonight is that the long period of conservative dominance of our politics has ended. It ended in this election because of a protest against Iraq primarily. Arianna is right about that. Also against the culture of scandal and against the sense that too many conservatives in Washington were more interested in power than in principles, and a lot of disappointment among conservatives around the country. And instead of this being an affirmative vote for Democrats, it was a rejection. It was a protest vote against Republicans. But it has opened the door for Democrats now to start a new era. They have to earn that. They're going to have to reach out. I thought Nancy Pelosi and especially Rahm Emanuel tonight. A new star was born in American politics tonight with Rahm Emanuel, who did such a mastermind of bringing the House over. Now we'll have to wait and see what the president does in his news conference tomorrow. Is he going to be defiant on Iraq, going against what Arianna just said, or is he going to listen and try to work with them? I think that's the next chapter. And for everyone, it's a new opening, a new chapter. We'll have to see where it goes.
Amy Holmes is the Republican strategist and former speechwriter for outgoing Senate Majority Leader Bill Frist. What's your read?
My read is that, yes, this is a good night for Democrats. Taking over the House was a victory for them. But I think there's less than meets the eye here, if I can disagree with David Gergen. This wasn't the end of conservatism. This was, as he said, a protest vote with George Bush. I think what this election showed tonight is actually that America is a very conservative nation. If you look at the Democratic candidates that Rahm Emanuel and Chuck Schumer put forward, these are socially conservative candidates. If you look at Ford, he campaigned as a pro-life candidate, as did Casey. Sherrod Brown, who looks like he beat DeWine in Ohio, he actually voted for the NSA surveillance, for border security. I think they won, as Arianna said earlier, because this was a protest vote, an anti-Iraq vote. This was not a vote necessarily for a Democratic liberal agenda.
But this was not a vote for conservative values. This was not a quote-unquote values election, except it was a vote against an immoral, unnecessary war. And the reason I keep stressing that is because it's very important for the Democrats to hear that. And I'm a little concerned about certain things said tonight by Howard Dean, for example, and even Barack Obama. Howard Dean, being interviewed earlier by Lou Dobbs, said that we are not going to quote-unquote cut and run in Iraq, using the president's phrase. He said we do not have a lot of power to influence the president's policies in Iraq. Well, the American people elected Democrats to take over the House in order to have influence, and they do have influence if they're willing to use it. What did Obama say? And Obama, when he was talking about the change in direction, and you asked him, what are you going to do about Iraq? He said, we're going to sit down with the commander-in-chief and with the other commanders and with Jim Baker, and we're going to come up with another strategy to stabilize the country. I'm paraphrasing, but the point is that we've been trying to stabilize the country for years, and it hasn't been working.
Yeah, Howard Dean's remark last week actually was really fascinating, and it certainly caught my ear. He, Lou Dobbs asked about it, and he said, well, voting for Democrats in the House, while it's a vote against the war and a vote against Iraq, he said, in fact, George Bush will still be in charge of foreign policy. It was a really remarkable
David,
comment.
what does the president say tomorrow?
I think it's going to be fascinating, Larry, because he's been so defiant so far. He said, I'm going to keep Don Rumsfeld regardless. Dick Cheney says full speed ahead on Iraq policy. it seems to me the country has spoken tonight and saying, you know, we don't like the course you're on. I'm not sure they want to cut and run, but they want a new course. I think they're looking for some sensible way to get out of Iraq without doing too much damage in the process. And if the president rejects that, I think all hell's going to break loose, because the country's going to feel, wait a minute, we're about a democracy. Aren't you supposed to listen to us? So I think the president is going to be under enormous pressure now to work with Democrats, to work with the Baker Commission. And if, in my judgment, I don't think he will fire Don Rumsfeld, but I bet there will be people. I think Don Rumsfeld himself will now think about falling on his sword and submitting his resignation voluntarily in the next couple of weeks.
One very significant thing that happened tonight is that the Republicans are no longer the party of national security. Remember, they won in 2002 and they won in 2004 as the party of national security, the party that was going to keep us safe. That's no longer the case. The president lost that advantage, and now it's up to Democrats to establish themselves as the party of national security.
But why did he lose that, since there's been no attack on the United States since?
Well, because we know perfectly well that what's happening in Iraq has made the country less safe. It has been a recruitment bonanza for terrorists, and that after all, the goodwill towards America has been squandered.
Don't you think, Amy, he might be conciliatory tomorrow?
I think he will be conciliatory. I think he's going to be looking about moving forward after tonight's results. And, you know, still Virginia and Missouri are still out, so we don't know about the Senate. But, of course, tomorrow I think that the president is going to be talking about moving forward, reaching out to the other side of the aisle, as he has done repeatedly throughout the course of the Iraq War.
Yeah, but Larry, here's the problem. I think rhetorically he'll be softer tomorrow, but the real question is, does he intend to stay on course to victory? There are many Democrats who think this is no longer winnable, and they're not interested in escalation. If the president won tonight, had they kept the House, I think he was going to look at sending a lot more troops into Baghdad. Will he still want to do that? I think he probably has to give that up. But will he still be looking for victory? I think he'll still be looking for victory. And a lot of Democrats don't want to admit it, say this publicly, but they don't think it's winnable, and they're looking for some way to disengage that does a minimal amount of damage to American national security and also leaves people in Iraq as good a position as we can.
President Bush is not going to accept the idea that the war in Iraq is not winnable. And we also have to remember, you know, the historical memory we have about our involvement in Iraq. After the first Gulf War, if you remember, President Bush, the first senior, he encouraged the Iraqis to rise up and overthrow Saddam. They did, and they were demolished. George Bush is not going to make that mistake of having asked the Iraqis in partnership to build a new, free, stable, democratic Iraq, and then abandon
What is the course to victory? What is the course to victory? Is it to put a lot more troops in? I personally think we should have put a lot more troops in a long time ago. But do you think we can still do this after this election?
But this option does not, there is no winning. That is really what we need to admit. Of course it is. It has already been lost. And that's why Democrats have a decision to make. Are they going to accept the Jack Murtha position? They have a leader within their ranks, Congressman Jack Murtha, who is actually going to be running for majority leader. That's one of the things to look forward to see what's going to happen against Congressman Stan Hoyer. What happens there will determine what Democrats are willing to do.
For a long time, I hosted the first national radio talk show on a network, the Mutual Radio Network, and did that for a lot of years, all night long. And Jim Bohannon replaced me. He's been doing it great for a long time. And we're going to check in to hear what Jim Bohannon's talking about right now. Let's see what we hear.
All right.
There he is.
Here I am, Larry. You notice anything familiar?
You're wearing
I knew you'd like to
suspenders
look.
in my honor. You still call yourself
in your honor.
Do you still call yourselves the militant moderate?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, sir, I do. Absolutely.
What are your listeners saying tonight?
Well, we've got a lot of conservatives who are very concerned about what they think is going to be a wild-eyed, flaming liberal House led by that screaming socialist Nancy Pelosi. And we've had a lot of our guest commentators suggest that Nancy Pelosi may well moderate and not be quite as liberal as Speaker as she was as a member of the House.
Are you surprised tonight?
Not really, no. I guess this has pretty much followed the conventional wisdom, Larry, that it looked like the House was going to go this way. I guess I'm somewhat surprised at some of the tight races and the extent to which we're going to have to wait to find out who controls the Senate. Missouri and Virginia, very probably days from being resolved. But I think not. In the House, I think the handwriting has been on the wall for a month or two.
Are you on a commercial break now?
No, actually, we're on our air here at the moment, so
well,
we're on Westwood One as well as.
Say hello to all my old listeners, Jim. Great seeing you.
It is good to see you too, Larry, and thanks for a chance to be on tonight.
Jim Bohannon, for
King
who's
right
familiar
there.
studios in Washington, D.C., doing his all-night radio talk show. When we come back, Senator Barbara Boxer of California. Don't go away.
Approaching 1:30 a.m. on this, the day after the election in the United States, and we're watching 3 Senate races very closely because these 3 Senate races hold the key whether the Democrats or the Republicans will be the majority in the Senate. The Democrats will be the majority in the House. First, let's go to Missouri right now with 81% of the precincts reporting Clara McCaskill, the Democrat, slightly ahead of Jim Talent. This is close, but McCaskill is ahead.
One of the factors here is that Talent is not running as well in some of the socially conservative areas, like down on the southwest around Springfield, as George W. Bush did 2 years ago. He's winning, but by not nearly as much.
In Virginia, with 99% of the precincts reporting, the Democratic challenger Jim Webb slightly, ever so slightly ahead. It's not over with yet, though.
For those Democrats who remember Ralph Nader in Florida in 2000, there was a Green Party candidate in Virginia, one Gail Parker, I believe, running basically on a one-issue campaign, high-speed rail service. She's got about 25,000 votes, and depending on what happens, if you assume most of those votes would have gone Democratic, she could wind up throwing this entire election season one way or the other.
The third and final undecided Senate race in Montana, right now with 55% of the precincts reporting John Tester, the Democratic challenger to Conrad Burns, slightly ahead there as well. So if you take these 3 races right now, and I want to throw it back to Larry King. Right now, the Democrats need to win all 3 of them. They are slightly ahead in all 3 of them, but still a long way to go. Larry?
Thanks, Wolf. Let's get the thoughts of a prominent United States senator not up for re-election this year, Senator Barbara Boxer. We just heard from Senator Feinstein, who was easily re-elected tonight. All right, what do you make of this?
I'm at the edge of my seat, Larry. Trust me, I am. And first, I'm thrilled with Diane's victory. It was huge. My pal in the Senate. Nancy Pelosi, my friend, I served in the House with her for many years. It's an extraordinary evening for equality in America, really. I just don't think people realize the significance of having a woman speaker, third in line to be president. She's a wonderful person. America's going to grow to love her.
Does she get a bad rap in this ultra-liberal tag?
Well, I think the people saying that don't really understand what a speaker does. It's not about Nancy's district, which is quite liberal. It's about Nancy bringing the caucus together. We are a big tent. Many people have commented on that. Many of our candidates are moderate to conservative to liberal. So the fact is, Nancy's job is to pull everybody together, find the common ground, work with the Republicans and get things done, and I predict she'll do that.
If you win these 3 Democratic races, and we may take till Christmas to find that out, how dramatically will the country change?
Well, I'm a person who believes it will change a great deal because whoever controls the House and the Senate controls the agenda, and the agenda is key. If, you know, with the Republicans there, they were putting things on the agenda that really didn't make that much difference to people. Flag burning instead of getting health care to our people. You know, big divisive debates about abortion instead of trying to bring our troops home and figure out a political solution in Iraq. So it makes a great bit of difference.
What about if it's just one House and the Senate remains Republican?
Good question, Larry, and I thought you'd ask it. The House is more important because of the rules of the way the House works versus the Senate. The Speaker of the House really has absolute control of what comes before the body. So if the Speaker and the caucus feel it's divisive to bring a certain issue forward, they can stop it. In the Senate, it's much more open. Unless you have 60 seats, it's hard to control everything.
Are you surprised that not one, and David Gergen thinks that's never happened before, not one Democratic incumbent congressperson lost tonight?
I think it's a statement about this wave that has hit the country. And I think Ariana was right when she talked about Iraq as being a central mover. There's other things too, the culture of corruption, the war on terror. We don't feel safer. We don't feel as safe as we should be. So I think that, you know, the Democrats stood up and, by the way, fought back. And I want to say something that I haven't heard discussed too much tonight, which is the quality of our candidates. And I can really speak to those in the Senate. America will come to know our candidates. You know, we lost one seat, Harold Ford, an extraordinary human being. And by the way, the race that he ran and the fact that he came as close as he did.
Well, it wasn't your seat. It was a Frist seat.
That's true. But the fact that he could come so close, he's a great candidate. And these other candidates, Jim Webb, strong, you know, standing up to the attacks. Claire McCaskill, who I really think she'll win. Jon Tester. These people are tough, they're strong, they know who they are. Sheldon Whitehouse. I mean, America's going to meet a whole new group of leaders, and I couldn't be more thrilled. I've campaigned for them. I've gone all over the country. My voice is kind of gone because I've been talking a lot about why we should take back the Senate. So I'm excited. Thanks for having me tonight.
Senator Barbara Boxer, Democrat of California. Let's go to Phoenix and talk to Senator John McCain, Republican of Arizona, former POW, decorated Vietnam veteran. How disappointed are you tonight, Senator?
Well, I lost a lot of good friends tonight, at least out of the Senate. We'll remain friends, but Mike DeWine, Rick Santorum, and some people that I've been very close to for many years. So, of course, I'm sad, and I believe, however, that this is a wake-up call to the Republican Party. We got to change our practices. Some of our people think we came to Washington to change government, and government changed us. And so, we're going to bounce back, Larry. We're going to get together and go over where we made our mistakes, fix them, and move forward. I still think America is a conservative nation.
What will this election say or have an effect on your presidential bid?
Well, I haven't made that decision yet, but I don't...
Let's say if you did, what effect would it have?
I don't know, Larry. I honestly hadn't thought about it, but I know this, that my first obligation is to sit down with other members of our party and say we got to fix these spending practices. We got to have the will to prevail in Iraq. We've got to reform immigration. We got to do some of the things we haven't done.
You strongly support the war, yet every one of the pundits here tonight are saying that the reason the Republicans took this hit tonight was that the public doesn't support the war. Does that give you pause?
No, but first I agree that the war is the overriding issue, but Joe Lieberman would not have been reelected in Connecticut if it was the only issue. I think this issue of the scandals, I think the spending has demotivated a lot of our Republican base. I think that there's a number of other areas, but look, I believe that we must have the will in Iraq, and we'd like to sit down with the Democrats, but if they don't, then the chaos that would ensue in this region would be very serious. I understand the frustration that Americans feel. I feel that frustration as well, and we've made many mistakes. But I also believe that, again, we cannot allow chaos to ensue in the region, and we can develop a strategy to prevail.
One thing then, Senator, one other thing, is the public saying we may support the concept of the war in Iraq, but don't support the way you're running it?
That's exactly it. I think that has a great deal to do with it. They're so frustrated, and they should be frustrated, because we had such, you know, the comments that were made like stuff happens and dead enders and all that. And many of us said we needed more troops over there for a long time. We now find out that that was the case, and military people were recommending it strongly.
Senator, we'll see a lot of you in the months ahead, and thanks very much for joining us, as always.
Thanks for having me on, Larry.
Senator John McCain, Republican of Arizona. Back to New York, Ken Wolf Blitzer. Wolf.
Larry, thanks very much. And we want to just update our viewers on another House race that we've been watching that had some national interest. The Texas 22nd District in Texas, Tom DeLay's district right now, and we're projecting that there will be a new Democratic congressman from Sugar Land, Texas. Nick Lampson will be the next United States congressman, succeeding Tom DeLay in that district, defeating Shelley Sekula Gibbs, who was the Republican candidate. Tom DeLay's name had been on the ballot. Shelley Sekula Gibbs' name was not on the ballot, but Nick Lampson, when all is said and done, will be the next United States congressman from Texas right there. Another major pickup for the Democrats in this contest. I want to take a closer look right now at Virginia. Just check this out one more time before we go back to Jeff Greenfield. George Allen with 49%, Jim Webb with 50%. The Green Party candidate, less than 1%, 25,000 votes. And Jeff Greenfield, you've suggested that if that Green Party candidate had not been running, it might have been a bigger, those votes potentially would have been more likely to go for Webb than for Allen.
Pretty safe bet. But I want to show you about the House. We've been so focused on the Senate. If we flip our smartboard and get over to the House, it's been a while since we updated the viewers. Right now, Democrats have 221 seats. Republicans 181. This is a gain so far of 19 seats. There are, by my fifth grade math, 34 seats left to be decided. So those people who figured on a 25 to 35 seat gain look very good. Those of us who picked 30 look even better. Wolf.
And you need 218 to be in the majority. That's right. Democrats clearly have that.
You can see that this dividing line is where the split would be, and you can see right now Democrats have 3 or 4 more seats than Republicans, but 34 seats left to be decided. We don't know yet how they're going to split. We do know Republicans have survived in a couple of districts where they were supposed to lose. Democrats have taken others. We'll bring everybody up to date once we figure out what's going on in the Senate.
In the Senate, those 3 seats remain key. I want to go back to the Senate for a moment. Those 3 undecided seats in the United States Senate will determine the balance of power in the next U.S. Senate.
It is. If you were a Hollywood writer and were writing a political drama and it came down to 3 seats where there were 3 very narrow margins separating one from the other, and where the entire control of the Senate might come down to 1 state where there's a recount, I think people would say this stuff doesn't happen. But as we remember from 2000, sometimes it does.
We'll watch those very, very closely. Jeff, thanks for that. We're going to continue our special coverage. Lots more coming up. We're going to stay with this story, see what the results are in those 3 states, Montana, Missouri, and Virginia. We'll update you right after this short clip.
And it has all come down to this: Virginia, Montana, Missouri, the 3 Senate races that we are watching very closely. We just heard John King from Senator John McCain. You were remarking on how different John McCain appeared.
Yeah, there's a lot of important stuff to figure out about the short term of American politics, including control of the Senate. But wow, was that a picture. I defy you to go back through the CNN library, any library you can find, and find a video of John McCain looking like that.
Sitting in front
an American flag, an Arizona flag. He usually sits in a studio out in Arizona that looks like the desert behind him. That was President John McCain making an appearance to the American people. The 2008 campaign, it had already begun, but it begins in earnest, of course, once the midterm election is gone by. And never before have I seen him like that. And you heard what he was saying. It's quite interesting. We need to win in Iraq. He's at odds with the public today on staying in Iraq, but he was saying significant mistakes were made. We should have had more troops. So you see John McCain creating some distance from the White House while sticking with the White House on the goal, but also talking about getting the Republicans back to the basics, the Ronald Reagan Republicans of fiscal constraints. That is, John McCain is trying to essentially assert his leadership. Many are going to say this president's a lame duck. John McCain is trying to say, here I am.
If you are John McCain tonight, though, what message do you take away from this? I mean, is this a good night for John McCain?
Well, in the sense that, you know, the issues that John brings up and that played out in some of these races is about fiscal conservatism. It's getting back to Ronald Reagan, who everyone believes is, you know, the godfather of the conservative movement. That's where it started. So, yes, he can take a lot of things from that. He's not going to change on the war. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So those, again, if they can get back to their sort of economic roots and the cutting taxes and that sort of thing, certainly there's a message there and something that John McCain can play into. I want to add one thing because we missed this part of it, but when Senator Clinton gave her acceptance speech, she went out arm in arm with her husband to the tune of "Baby, you ain't seen nothing yet." So I just like to say we've turned the corner and it's 08.
It certainly is. Talking about public relations, not just in presidential politics, but also in the Senate races, you have Jim Webb. Even though these numbers right now between Webb and Allen, we're talking about looking at it right now with 99% of the precincts and some 2,000 or so voters. Jim Webb saying he is the winner. Obviously, we cannot call that at this point. This is going to go on well into tomorrow, perhaps even points beyond. But the public relations war has already begun.
Absolutely, Andrew. And I think we'll see that actually people will be parsing that statement that Webb made. And I think he said we would like to, blah, blah, saying, using the subjunctive, and people will be parsing that for days, saying, did he declare victory, or was he saying, I wish I could declare victory? But looking at those numbers, looking at the precincts that are outstanding, there are so few votes still to be counted in Virginia that the New York Times are calling the same numbers that we're using, and we're saying 99% of precincts reporting. There are so few precincts left, the New York Times is actually calling it 100% reporting. They're not calling the race, but they're calling that 100%. We're talking about a margin of error. We're talking about a rounding error at this point. I don't say you avoid the recount, but it's clear that both sides are going to want to say that they're the ones in front right now. The amazing thing is, I swear, you go and look at the stats, you look at those precincts and counties that are outstanding, and in every single one, Webb has won. The precincts are actually there from those counties already. So it looks like it was really hard to imagine the Democrats could ever take the Senate. They still may not take the Senate. That was such a long shot. But looking at the way things are stepping up, it could happen, which is extraordinary.
Let's bring in CNN's Dana Bash, who's at Democratic Party headquarters. She joins us now. What is the scene there right now, Dana?
Well, the scene right now here where I'm standing, where there were hundreds of people, now it's empty. Most people have gone home except for 2 senators we believe are still here somewhere in this building. Senator Harry Reid, the minority leader, and Senator Chuck Schumer, the senator, of course, in charge of getting Democrats elected. They are still watching the returns, trying to figure out if they can come to some, as Candy said before, closure about what will happen in the Senate. But as we've been talking about, it's not likely to happen tonight. But we do believe that they are actually still trying to figure that out. But on the other side of Capitol Hill, of course, the big story of the evening was Nancy Pelosi, soon to be the first female Speaker of the House. What was interesting about her speech here is that she came out and she certainly tried to make the case that she was going to reach across party lines, saying that she wants to end the era of partisanship, move towards partnership. But she was very, very strong, strikingly so, when it came to the war in Iraq. She said that she really believes that what the American people wanted to say when they sent the message tonight that Democrats should go to Washington is that they want to have something different when it comes to Iraq. And as we've been talking about tonight, whether or not the Democrats in control of the House, maybe even the Senate, or at least having more seats in the Senate, can have any real impact on the policy in Iraq. They made it clear tonight they're certainly going to try.
Dana Bash reporting from Democratic Party headquarters. Thanks. If you are Nancy Pelosi, what do you do tomorrow, the next day? What happens now?
I think you'd be very careful and cautious and stick to the middle. Here's something she has said about the president repeatedly. When the president says Iraq is a central front of the war on terror, she says no, it's not, that it's a war of choice that Mr. Bush started. She says, quote, he has a tin ear. He won't accept the facts and he won't tell the truth to the American people. If that continues, President Bush will reach out tomorrow. She reached out tonight, but 24, 48 hours down the road, if that continues, saying the president has a tin ear, he won't accept the facts, he won't tell the truth to the American people, how do you get anything done in that environment? They can make some progress on domestic issues, but Iraq dominated this campaign, and it will dominate the post-election dynamic until they sort this out.
First of all, he's the commander-in-chief. I mean, those are the basic facts right there.
Which is what Howard Dean said tonight, again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and so their ability to sway him is bully pulpit stuff. They now have a microphone, and they can set the agenda, as Nancy Pelosi said, but they can't change how many troops are there, or even the plan, whatever plan George Bush has. They can't do that. They can bring pressure to bear. Probably the people, however, favor, who can bring the most pressure to bear, are Republicans. These are people, look, George Bush is retiring in 2 years. So, but these other Republicans would like to start to look at some way to re-expand their base, as we heard from John McCain. So they're the ones that can go to him and say, hey, we got to do something here. We've got to figure this out. So that's where the pressure, the most impressive pressure will come from, is the Republican side.
And the pressure tonight still on Montana and Missouri. 85% of the precincts in Missouri, 60% of the precincts in Montana reporting. We continue to follow these three fascinating Senate races. Our coverage continues in a moment. Stay tuned.
Democrats are the majority in the House of Representatives based on all the results we have so far and all of our projections. Still unclear what happens in the United States Senate. 3 states still up in the air right now: Virginia, Missouri, and Montana. But in all 3 of those states, as of this moment, the Democratic candidates are ahead, slightly ahead, not very much, but in all 3 the Democratic candidates are ahead, and they're going to need all 3 of those states if the Democrats are going to be the majority in the United States Senate. We're going to stay on top of this story. Larry, this has been an exciting night, as we projected it would be. Doesn't get much more exciting than this.
What a night. It's been exciting all day and all night, and it may be exciting till Christmas, depending on Virginia. We're going to spend a couple of more moments with Amy Holmes, the Republican strategist and former speechwriter for Bill Frist, and Arianna Huffington, the founder and editor of HuffingtonPost.com, whose latest book, by the way, is On Becoming Fearless in Love, Work, and Life. And our special guest on Larry King Live tomorrow night to get a real reading on all of this will be Bill Maher. What's the effect, Arianna, on the 2008 presidential race?
Actually quite significant, because the losers tonight are those candidates who have basically not made the war in Iraq their central issue, like Hillary Clinton. Even though she won very comfortably and she is a superstar in the Democratic Party, she has been triangulating and calculating about Iraq consistently, and this is not a good night for her. On the Republican side, you heard John McCain. It's just really sad what happened to the Straight Talk Express. You know, the man who spoke the truth is now
Are you saying he doesn't believe what he's saying?
Everything he's saying now, whether it is about creationism versus evolution, or about Iraq or anything, is calculated to win the nomination, the Republican nomination. So basically, right now, the battle that has begun is the battle for who is going to control the narrative about 06. What is it about?
Is McCain the obvious favorite, Amy?
There are a lot of favorites.
For the Republican nomination?
For the Republican nomination, you have Mitt Romney, you have possibly Giuliani. 2008 is going to be wide open. George Bush is not going to be on that ticket, nor is Vice President Cheney.
Okay. We're going to go to Missouri now. We're going to break in here. We understand Claire McCaskill is about to speak. She's slightly ahead. Let's watch.
I know. Okay. Thank you all very much. Thank you so much for staying up late with us. The great state of Missouri has spoken. Tonight, we have heard the voices of Missourians, and they have said, we want change. They have said, we want accountability. They have said, we want an independent voice. Willing to stand up to anyone or anything to fight for Missouri's families. They have said they want a different set of priorities. And they have also said they want to restore the luster to the American dream and strengthen wisdom to our foreign policy. Missourians have rejected the politics of personal character attacks. And they have embraced the power of problem solving and new ideas.
Although we haven't said that, she's declaring victory in Missouri, if that's true. And then if the Democrat wins in Montana, then everything will hinge on Virginia, and that could take days, maybe even a month. A couple of more moments with the panel. All right, Amy, I interrupted you as to where we go from here in 08.
Well, where we go from here in 08, as I said, is that it's wide open and there's no telling what the situation will be in Iraq. I would guess that both the Republican and Democratic frontrunners are going to be shaping their own agenda about where they want America to go in the next 4 years. But in terms of this election, Democrats kept saying that America wants to change, but they wouldn't say where. And if you look at the Democrats who were successful tonight, many of them were social conservatives. Chuck Schumer, he, swallowed his ideology and put Bob Casey forward. So I think tonight it's a win for Democrats, but it's not necessarily a win for a liberal agenda.
Will you call tonight historic?
It is historic. It's a win for checks and balances. Finally, there is going to be, I hope, some adult supervision of this White House. And Candy Crowley said that Democrats have the bully pulpit. They have much more than the bully pulpit. They have the power of the purse in Congress, and they have the power of investigation. I hope they're going to use both of them.
Thank you both very much. Amy Holmes and Arianna Huffington. That's it from Los Angeles. See you tomorrow night on Larry King Live with Bill Maher as our special guest. But our coverage, of course, doesn't stop. Back to New York and Lou Dobbs. Lou?
Larry, thank you very much. Jeffrey Toobin is back with us, and we are obviously, with everything that is happening in Virginia, staring with, I think it would be fair to say, absolute certainty at a recount, and there is a lot of law to be understood in governing this recount and carrying it out.
And this is not a short process, as we discussed earlier. Like most things involving...
Nothing about this election has been a short process.
But, I mean, we have this absolutely extraordinary situation shaping up that if the Missouri goes the way it's going to the Democrat, if Montana goes to the Democrat, the entire control of the Senate will come down to this presumed recount in Richmond, Virginia.
What can we expect based on your reading of these statutes?
Okay, this is the timeline. Starting tomorrow, the provisional ballots, that is the ballots that people who were not on the lists, people who thought they should be allowed to vote but for whatever reason were not allowed to vote today, those ballots will start to be counted tomorrow. All the results will be tabulated over the next 2 weeks, and then on September 27th, the State Board of Elections will meet to certify the winner. It is only at that point that the loser will be asking for a recount. So between now and November 27th, there won't be any recount because the election won't be final. On November 27th, if one candidate is behind by less than 1%, which is certainly going to be the case, the loser will have a chance to ask for a recount.
Do we have any sense at this point how many provisional ballots are involved in this election?
We've been trying to find that.
Right.
We just don't know. It's polling place by polling place. There is no central repository of that number as far as we can tell at this point.
Well, and after this determination is made, then what is the process?
Okay.
Let's get to the granular.
Within 7 days of the November 27th, the judge, the chief judge in Richmond, Virginia, the circuit court there, has to set a preliminary hearing. It has to be within 7 days. And within 7 days of that, the judge has to issue a ruling. You'll be pleased to know that under Virginia law, that ruling, which becomes a 3-judge court, is final and not appealable. So it should end in December. But the last recount in Virginia, which was only last year in the Virginia Attorney General's race, ended on December 22nd, 3 days before Christmas. So we could be looking at least that long.
And that is a lot of suspense for the most deliberative body in the world to wait on who will decide what
Well, and you can imagine the lawyers that are being mobilized at this
Right.
point. I mean,
would guess at this very
someone,
moment.
as someone who spent 36 days in Tallahassee 6 years ago, I mean, the same cast of characters, I have already been speaking to them on the phone. They're all revving up and getting ready to go for a little Tallahassee reunion.
Oh, man. Well, this is, though, democracy at work. And this has a very good feel about this, because it seems, at least at this point, a heavy turnout. This is obviously a close election. But this recount process, I'm trying to find the best of
I'm
this.
glad you're encouraged.
I
But,
really
I mean,
am.
these recounts turn into very ugly affairs. I mean, the people who are involved in them, in Indiana in 1985, there was a congressional recount there that people are still bitter about. Obviously, Democrats are still enraged about Florida 6 years later.
But through this process, we'll have a very good sense as to whether anyone has been disenfranchised. We'll have a very good sense as to whether votes have been counted accurately. On balance, a positive.
Absolutely, and scrutiny is. I mean, we're journalists. Scrutiny is a good thing.
I love scrutiny. I love transparency.
And we will know a lot more about how these votes were cast starting tomorrow. But one thing about recounts that is always true: it is much, much better to go in ahead. They almost never change their results.
Which could explain why, with just about the slimmest possible margin there, James Webb said he's the winner.
Absolutely. And just about that recount in last year, only 27 votes shifted. So even though it seems like Webb has a very small lead, about 1,500 votes, it's a lot more than 27. So if this holds up